Welcome to the Walk Around Podcast. Our goal is to share with you the insights, the skills, the processes, and the leaders that are influencing the retail automotive landscape today. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Funch, and I'm excited about our guest today, Mr. Eric Day from the Henry Automotive Group. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Nick. Glad to be here.
Yeah, just a little bit about Eric for our listeners out there. He's been with Henry Automotive Group since 2005 as the CFO and has led the evolution of unprecedented growth and expansion. With his involvement in all aspects of the core retail auto dealership business, the company has more than doubled its performance, growing to over $650 million in consolidated revenue just in 2017. He also co-founded Flex Wheels, a vehicle subscription company, and Dealer Intelligence, a software as a service business intelligence platform for auto dealers that drives reporting, analytics, workflow automation, and event-based alerting. There's a lot more we could get into, but let's take a walk around with Eric Day. Eric, so tell us, how did you get into retail automotive and kind of what led you to where you are today?
I've been in the auto business now for about 28 years. So I've had kind of an interesting pathway coming from the financial services side first on consumer credit and then commercial credit, working with auto dealers. And then on the OEM side, working with a manufacturer, with Jaguar Land Rover, for example, for a number of years, and then coming into the retail side in 2005. So it's given me a good perspective on the entire vertical with a deep understanding of how things work within each of those components that really drive the ecosystem. And I think that's been, something that's been very helpful for me and us as an organization, obviously, whether I'm dealing with OEMs or dealing with banks and things of that nature. So it's not your typical career path, I think.
Yeah.
But and also during that time period, heavily involved in IT related matters, and learned to write code, and became a certified database architect and systems engineer, and was always fascinated with data and the power of computing, and how bringing that together with business operations could create something that was very compelling, and in some cases maybe creating a competitive advantage, or more sophistication of how you looked at the business and the metrics, and deeper understanding of the drivers of profitability and things of that nature. So that's all culminated, I think, as we see our industry going through lots of changes, and lots of things coming together, and IT for many is at the center of everything now, and it's become really a critical component of driving success in businesses, and really can be a huge differentiator. So when you look at the importance of IT and data, and you apply it to all types of disciplines, it's really something that's been advantageous for us.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Certainly, no doubt. I think anyone that's better leveraging data is better positioning themselves for the future. But thinking about it, it's almost like the data is the fuel for the people a little bit to manage or execute better in their roles. How do you go about kind of aligning your people and getting kind of your people in a position where they can be successful? Do you have a kind of an approach there?
Yeah, so one of the things that we instituted within the organization is bi-monthly meetings across the business operations, and they're multidisciplinary. So we have people from accounting, people from marketing, people from operations, sales, et cetera, all participating in the meeting. And we kind of call it our asset management meeting. We review kind of a wide scope of different aspects that affect the business and the departments within the businesses, and the various disciplines get exposure to other departments and other disciplines that maybe they don't work in on a day-to-day basis, but it allows them to really have a much deeper understanding of what's happening. And through that, I've seen, a growth with our associates, being able to have a more holistic understanding of how business flows and processes flow and customer experiences and journeys. And it's really, you've heard the expression, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I've
Yeah,
really
100%.
seen, the IQ level, if you will, of the organization increase tremendously because of that, as well as the productivity, the efficiency. So some of that stuff is sometimes a bit intangible and not so easy to measure. But clearly you can see that in how effective people become now because their knowledge base is improved. And I always say, it's like you go through these different phases where you go from, you turn data into information, and then information gets turned into knowledge, and then knowledge eventually becomes wisdom. And
Yeah.
the difference between knowledge and wisdom is knowledge is knowing what the answer is, and wisdom is knowing what question to ask. And so when you don't know what you don't know, that's where, eventually you get to the point where you start to get the wisdom and you say, okay, I don't know, but I know what question to ask so that I can know. And so, it's getting the folks there to that level. And so it's been fun to watch people progress and learn. And I think people really appreciate being exposed to that as well. So they're not just, sort of stuck in the silo of their day-to-day scope of duties, and it gives them a lot more exposure. And ultimately, you want people to wake up in the morning and have a sense of purpose, a sense of excitement about where they come. That's really important. That you wake up each day and you're sort of excited about going into the office, and that you matter, and that what you do makes a difference, and you understand how what you do affects the organization. And that's really what's important about these things. And those are some of the intangibles that all help to bolster the culture and the atmosphere that we have within the organization. And you see it in other associates where they get excited, the level of communication and collaboration with one another. And it's nice to see, the starting of something like that, and how it begins to grow and permeate throughout the organization.
Yeah. So first off, I need to call attention. I love that kind of knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is kind of knowing the answer, and wisdom knowing the question to ask. I think I had that right.
Yeah,
And I think that's a great just kind of takeaway for anyone, no matter what level you are listening today. But the other thing I love kind of your approach is breaking down those barriers between departments, because I think the sight lines differ, and the perspectives you spoke about kind of creating that ecosystem. The other day I was interviewing a candidate for a job, and they were I said, hey, they were a retail associate, kind of retail background. I said, what's the biggest thing you learned? Kind of give me one of your biggest learning lessons. And they spoke about kind of coming up through the sales floor and being commission based, and how they viewed every expense to a vehicle and every RO as kind of cutting into that potential margin, that they could make. And so they were a hawk on making sure they bought, the reconditioning was done at the most economical price. And it took, they shared this story about it took a GM kind of pulling them back to understand that, hey, when you buy parts through our parts department, you kind of support the people in the parts department, the business as a whole. When the technician in the shop puts that part on, you support the technician, that family. And he just spoke about kind of just having blinders on to this commissioned front end and trying to protect that margin at all costs without being able to see the big picture. And it really opened his eyes. And I think kudos to you for that kind of that meeting you have that exposes members of their team to the levers they pull in the F&I office impact other things with across the dealership, and
yeah.
having that foresight.
It's yeah, there was a book I read. It was called The Great Game of Business, and that's kind of where I got some of the inspiration for trying to institute these types of meetings that now occur on a regular basis, and creating that environment. But the idea was everybody should have transparency and understanding of what it takes, to make money and generate cash flow, so to speak.
Yeah.
and having that deeper knowledge, and regardless of what your role is in the organization. And through that process, you're going to raise the level of knowledge and IQ, and productivity and effectiveness in the organization. So in some part, I kind of took some of the elements of, what I read and got inspired about from the great game of business, and try to put a little bit of that within the organization. So, and we've been doing it now for, I think it's been probably well over a year and a half. We started out, kind of piloting it at one store, our Audi dealership, and it started out and it was doing great, and we continue to add to it. So we're adding more
Yeah.
content. So it continues to get more robust, and we add more depth to certain disciplines. Like today we might, or excuse me, in the beginning we might be more heavily concentrated in sales and maybe service, but parts and maybe accounting was a little lighter. But now we're adding more to those, and so everybody's going to be more engaged. And I almost feel it's like, like a 20 group, where you're
Yeah.
a moderator, except it's with your team and your people, and you're really helping your team to have a deeper understanding of what's going on in the company, and how things really work and flow. And it's been a wonderful, tool for us. And again, like I said, we continue to evolve with it as well.
Yeah, that's great. Pivoting a little bit and kind of speaking about people and their growth and development. I know that it's something that you as a leader and your organization is kind of passionate about. How do you and maybe I should kind of give a little background. We had an opportunity to catch up before we hit the record button, and one of the things you were sharing is about kind of breaking down that fear around training somebody to do your job. How do you kind of approach that within and foster that environment that it's not that's a good thing, that's healthy for the organization, it's not a threat.
Well, clearly we want to develop leadership here that is not afraid to, develop other people. I think, when we look at success of leaders, in large part, the success of that leader is how well the people have done, that have worked for you.
Hmm.
And so the only way those people are going to be successful and grow is if you mentor them, if you coach them, if you share with them your ideas, your thoughts. And you can't have that type of environment if you're scared to divulge information because you're afraid someone's going to do better than you or take your job or anything like that. And so, I mentioned to you earlier, we're really focused on our people as one of our main assets within the organization. We can have these wonderful brands and we can have these beautiful buildings, and certainly those are critical pieces to attract talent, within the organization. But without the people making it all happen, making the magic happen, you really don't have, all the ingredients there to be successful. So creating that culture where people, also feel comfortable
Hmm.
that they can open up, that they're not going to have, someone make fun of them, because they didn't know something. That this is a learning environment. That you have to ask questions because you don't know what you don't know. And so it's sort of setting the ground rules to make sure that people know it's okay if you don't know. Ask the question. There's no dumb questions. This is how
Yeah.
we learn. And it's really important for you to ask questions about something that you may not understand in IT, and IT to understand something from the business operational side, that you might think is a stupid question, but it's not. And
Yeah.
that's how we learn. And so I think everybody's really embraced that here with all of our associates, and the communication levels have improved. I mean, these teams are getting together at least twice a month, to go through some of these meetings I was talking to you about earlier. And then outside of those meetings, you also see the communication level now, so much more, because people are really comfortable and at ease with each other. They can really open up with each other, and that's really the breakthrough that you need to kind of get to the other side, and really start pushing the organization forward. As obviously we're going through a lot of change, and you're trying to turn sometimes a large ship that's not always easy to turn quickly. But when you have that many people rowing together in the same boat, you've got much better momentum, and that's been very powerful within our organization.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, and it's a testament. I think you're seeing it in the business results as well. One of the challenges that's kind of industry wide is technicians, and kind of how to kind of create your own technician. And you guys have had a very interesting and unique approach, and have kind of attacked that challenge head on. How have you gone about that, Eric?
Yeah, we're clearly trying to get ahead of what we, saw as something coming that was going to affect our industry tremendously. And when we looked at the industry shortage, it was, I think, near 40,000 technicians.
Mhm.
That was going to almost double with existing technicians that were effectively aging out. And, looking at a gap of 80,000 technicians. And then on top of that, looking at this industry that's going through this evolution with electrification and connectivity, and essentially this whole new powertrain that requires a skill set that is in part, not really understood by a lot of the techs. There's a whole nother level of training and
Mhm.
certification that have to take place with electric powertrains and so on. So you have this whole upskilling component with lack of supply of technicians, and you look at what I would call sort of consumer direct models came out. Obviously, Tesla is one of them, but
Right.
you have companies like Rivian, you have companies like Lucid, perhaps somebody like a Byton or what have you. But the point is that these companies are now coming into the marketplace, and they're seeking out and technicians and talent from the same ponds that we're all fishing in as well. So, clearly there's more competition outside of just franchise and independent dealers. Let's say you have these consumer direct OEMs now, non-traditional OEMs that are also going into the marketplace and trying to lure existing techs away and obviously bring them in. So, the point is, it's like, okay, well, am I going to outspend the next guy and put myself in that environment? And also understanding that we needed to hire probably upwards of almost 60 technicians
Yeah.
the next couple of years with what we have coming in the pipeline as far as facilities that we're going to be building and everything. And when they open up, we need to be prepared. So we can't wait till we open and then try to figure it out. We've got to have enough lead time to make sure that we're covered and we've got competent and trained technicians and we're ready to hit the ground running. And the other piece of this is how critical the fixed operations are to the business model. When you look at the margin contribution from fixed operations, labor margins typically run 75 to 80%, parts margins 30 to 35%. And when you blend that together, it's, on average, probably 50 cents on the dollar in revenue is contributing to, cover your overhead and profitability. Whereas on the variable side, that's usually between 5 and maybe 10% when you look at your front end and your back end dollars and everything. So, you're talking about 5 cents, 10 cents on the dollar versus 50 cents. So when you look at the shift eventually to maybe electrification and perhaps, reductions of margins and things of that nature, it's important, for you to get ahead of this to make sure that you're able to shift your business model to really focus on serving and catering to the capacity needs that are going to be required there. And you can't accommodate that if you don't have the workshop and the bays and everything, but secondly, if you don't have the technicians. And so our attempt to really try to get ahead of that was that we were going to start going out and creating schools
Uh,
to really go after kids that didn't really have anybody coming to them at this point at the high school level first, uh, to say, listen, if you're not going to go to school because A, you don't have the money, or B, you don't have the grades, that's okay. We got away from this notion of vocational
right.
training and schooling. Everybody was taught that you had to go to a 4-year college, and the ironic scenario is that these kids can walk away after essentially a 2-year education with certification levels that allow them to, in a short space of time, get upwards of six-figure compensation without having any school debt, and
Yeah.
um, and then grow from there. You know, if you look at companies like AutoNation, I mean, Mike Jackson started as a technician
Yeah.
at Mercedes-Benz, right? So it's not to say that you can't have that kind of career growth, and yet they're not starting from a place that's way behind in huge amounts of student loans and debts that they have to deal with. So, and it's also an exciting time for them to come in because our industry is at the precipice of a major transformation with these electric powertrains that are coming, and I think it's an exciting time for those to get in on the ground floor opportunity with what's happening. But it's also an interesting time where it's a unique opportunity for them to learn both internal combustion engine powertrains
Yeah.
as well as, and so to have some of that legacy, kind of tacit knowledge that's out there in the existing more senior technicians, and to scoop up some of the intellectual property today before perhaps everything begins to shift to these other vehicles is also a great opportunity for them. So it's really getting in front of these kids, explaining that level of opportunity and excitement to them, and then getting them enrolled in this program. So we set up a school one of our headquarters.
Uh-huh.
We initially enrolled about 20 students, and we work in partnership with Miami-Dade Public Schools. And it's a 2-year program that we put together. And these kids spend half the day in the classroom where they're learning with a instructor, from the textbook perspective, and they go through
Yep.
obviously the curriculum that's aligned with the Florida Department of Education in this case, as it relates to uh, eventually come out with the competency to get their ASE certifications. And in our case, we were able to negotiate with the manufacturer to also allow the instructor to get trained so that they could get the training they need to be designated as a level 2 certified technician for one of the brands that we represent here. So that's another opportunity. And then we also work with the state to get accreditation, so they'll have effectively the equivalent of an associate's degree as a part of this as well. So, and what I say to them is that this skill set that they have will be valuable no matter where they go. So,
Right.
if they move to another state or something, they're always going to have a super valuable skill set. They'll be highly sought after. Obviously, we want them to stay with us, and that's the point. But they're not locked in. We're not tying them down. So this is a great program. So we started that program in August of last year. So
Hmm.
we just passed the 1-year mark, and the program overall, like I said, is 2 years. And we're actually in the process of starting up another school in the building. This time we're partnering with Miami-Dade Community College, as
Okay.
well as other governmental resource agencies such as CareerSource, South Florida Economic Development Council, et cetera. And we're tapping into some resources that will allow us to grab students that are, need a living wage.
Right.
So while they're learning these skill sets, so the idea is that, they need a living wage to kind of support themselves. They need access to reliable transportation. And so having those two things, which are historically barriers to success of programs like that, taken care of and out of the way, they can now really focus on the education and applying what they've learned, in the classroom as well as in the workshop. So that's something we're launching hopefully later this month, if not early October, up here, and then looking to do another one down in South Miami as well. So they spend half the day in the classroom, and then the rest of the day they spend in the workshop, and they get to actually apply what they learn in the classroom, and they work on these vehicles. So with the instructor, with the current program that we have, the partnership that we have with Miami-Dade Community College is a little bit different in the sense that you have the instructor in the classroom, but at that point the students would go into the workshop, and it's more of an apprentice type program, similar to like the European model. When you look in Europe,
Right.
like Mercedes, BMW, places like that, et cetera, in Germany, they actually will pair up with an existing technician and kind of become an apprentice under them. So The trade-off is that drags you down a little bit from a productivity standpoint, because maybe it's going to put more strain on your existing techs who are sort of being held back because they're spending a little bit of time training, coaching, mentoring, developing. But it's like going backwards to go forward scenario. And we have good programs in place with our existing techs where they're rewarded and
Yeah.
compensated for that as well. So that's a new program that we're rolling out. So we're looking to replicate that, and I'm hopefully working on some other programs that I would like to deal with the Department of Education, because the curriculum that we have today is exclusively around internal combustion engine. There's
Right.
really limited curriculum about electrification. There's a small piece of it, but with what's coming, we really do, as a state, need to get ahead of that and really amend the curriculum to help that out. So this is something that, like I said, we're looking to grow our own technicians. I'm hopeful that within the next 12 months we can get as many as 50 technicians, students, if you will, and effectively in these various programs that'll all be matriculating at different times, and then we continue to have that as a pipeline. But ultimately, I would like to see some type of charter school program out
Yeah.
there for vocational. I would like to see if we could tap into the Hope Scholarship Fund that was created, where dealers have actually become the sole collection repository for that program. And it was initially started as um, a program for bullying for students, that they could basically apply for a voucher. They get a $7,500 voucher to then go to a charter school outside of the school that they were at previously. And when we looked at the program, when the law passed a few years ago, like I said, auto dealers were the sole collection repository for this. And basically, we take a portion of the sales tax proceeds on the sale of a vehicle at the election of the consumer, and then we remit that into the Hope Scholarship Fund. And annually, we've been collecting as an industry, north of 40 million a year.
Hmm.
And I don't think, to my knowledge, there has been more than $1 million spent out of the fund. So I think there's a tremendous amount of surplus. And I know that at some period of time, the Department of Education, I believe, was working on other ways in which to leverage the resources to focus on things. But I would like to see if we can maybe tap into some of those monies to help address, a huge shortage and issue that we have in our industry, but also help people recognize this is a great career path, and it's an opportunity for them to make money and have very marketable and valuable skills. So there's a lot of different balls moving in that regard, and it's something that I look forward to continuing to develop for us.
Yeah, I think and if you preparing for the future, if there's a case study on using data to inform and then create knowledge and wisdom, it sounds like that program as a whole is kind of that formula and application. So kudos to you and your leadership, and but also I think the team that works with you at Warren Henry and executing and that vision, because I think you will, there's no doubt about it, reap the rewards of that hard work that you're doing today.
Yeah,
So
and it's really, getting everybody to understand that vision. So I think it's
yeah,
important, always start with why. Why are we doing this? And
yeah,
I think if you understand that first, you really understand the mission, and that's where everybody that you have, because you're only as good as your team. I mean, you can paint this picture and this vision, but you got to execute on it, right? So I think that's important. Is everybody, but always start with why. Then we can get into the what, and then we can get into the how and
yeah,
when. Right?
yeah,
The why thing is really critical. People have to understand when they wake up in the morning or when they're doing something, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this? And
yep,
I think that gives people meaning. And as trite as that may sound, that's really important,
yeah.
to have
There's
meaning and purpose.
no doubt. I think it helps everyone kind of get through and take those next steps when they understand their bigger picture and their own why. So, Eric, this has been fantastic. I feel like I could talk to you and kind of pick your brain for hours on end. Kudos to you and your leadership. And I hope our listeners enjoyed it too. I know that this is a big opportunity. So thank you for joining us today. If you're listening out there and you like this podcast, please share it with your friends. Also, drop us a note and tell us who else you'd like to hear from or other topics of interest to you. So, Eric, thanks again for joining us. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it.